Hello and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is August 13th, 2019. In just a moment, we'll be on to your marine, aviation, and public forecast. But don't forget, you can get our forecast by dialing 1-800-472-0391 or simply visit our website by going to weather.gov/Alaska and just click anywhere on the map. Now let's start the day with looking at our important areas across the area across the state. And here we've got yellow. This is for our wind advisory along the Steese Highway. We're seeing some gusty conditions for the summits along the highway there between 20 to 30 miles per hour with higher gusts to 40 miles per hour, and that's expected to last through the overnight hours. Now, the areas in orange are for flood watches, and this is for rainfall that's continuing to move across the area. Now, from Denali Park towards Fairbanks, we're expecting additional rain between 1 to 1.5 inches with locally higher amounts through tomorrow. Through tomorrow night for Fairbanks area north towards the Chanis Hot Springs. The recreational areas out there should be aware of the river rises, and also the campgrounds that are really close to these areas might need to take precautions so they are not in those flooding areas. Now, rock slides and mudslides are going to also be a possibility, especially along the ranges there near Denali Park. So if you're in these locations, be on the lookout for high water rises along streams, rivers, and then mudslides and rock slides are going to be issues as we head into the end of the week. You'll see that conditions will persist. Now, on the other side of things, the fire danger is not as widespread, but we are still seeing concern from the Copper River Basin to the Susitna Valley and the Western Kenai. Also a small area here across the northern panhandle. And moving on to the weather systems, going right to the satellite data, just wanted to show you the jet stream is pointed towards the interior direction, and this is bringing clouds and rain across the area, helping to support that moisture advecting from the North Pacific. Now, across the southeast locations all the way through the eastern Bering, there is a ridge influence. It's flattening out a little bit as this low pressure overrides it. And then the low clouds you'll see in just a minute. It doesn't show up that well on the satellite because the clouds are very similar to the temperatures at the surface near the water. Now here's the next low pressure system that's developing to the west. Putting that into motion, you can see that next plume of moisture already moving into the Bering. We're expecting that to have eastward progression as we head into tomorrow. So we'll be on the lookout for the stream of moisture pulling in, bring some more rain to the Fairbanks area and north. Now let's take a look at the surface maps from today. We do still have the ridge that we spoke about for days. However, that has flattened out a bit and is allowing a disturbance to move through and bring some rainfall all across southern areas of the state. Now, further to the west, here's the surface low pressure associated with that newly developing low. This is an occluded system with some gusty flow out of the south between 20 to 35 miles per hour with a northerly flow a little bit lighter across the western Aleutians near Shimei at this point. Now, across the southeast, one area to note is that we did have some offshore flow, so they saw some breaks in the clouds today. So clearing skies, allowing temperatures to warm up pretty nicely in the 60s and 70s today. For the much of the south central locations, just primarily cloudy skies, light rain, as well as the southwest here. They got the bulk of the rain through this morning and are just experiencing some light rain with upper level disturbances moving through that jet stream flow. Now to the north, we have a low pressure system that's kind of stalled along the northwest coast. This is a 1001 millibar low, bringing a very cold air mass towards the northern Bering waters. And now along the frontal side of the system, a little bit warmer temperatures stalled towards Point Barrow. Now, looking at tonight's weather, this low pressure system is going to weaken, but it's going to stall, and the colder air mass is going to pull towards the Seward Peninsula and the northern Bering. The ridge is going to stay in place. It's going to flatten out, and it's also going to help marine fog to develop across much of the Gulf water locations. So look for fog development across the northern panhandle from Yakutat towards those northern channels in the southeast. We'll also possibly see some of that fog making it into the Prince William Sound. For the southwestern locations, primarily just some light rain showers overnight with some rain moving through the flow across the eastern waters. So will be a mix of fog and light rain across much of the Bering, with the main weather system staying around the low pressure system to the west. Now this low pressure system will continue to deepen to 992 millibars, keeping that flow rather gusty across the central waters for your Wednesday. So across the eastern areas of the Bering, the ridge influence is going to stay in place with increasing foggy conditions for the Gulf locations. Some light rain will be possible across the southeast with increasing marine layer for your Wednesday. Now for the southern tier of the state, we'll stay on the cloudier side with some light rain possible as the weak troughing from the system developing across the interior will be extending into the northern Gulf waters. Low pressures to the north will also keep another area for light rain to initiate, with some patchy fog conditions expected along the coast. For the areas across the northern Bering, that will be in between the ridge and low pressure. So again, additionally, mostly light rain showers there with foggy conditions across the southern and southeastern Bering waters. Now, as we head into your Thursday, the ridge is going to build a little bit stronger to a 1,034 millibar ridge. So a very stable air mass around the system will bring fog across much of the Gulf, the southeast, and the eastern Bering. Now, across the interior, rain will be ongoing for the interior locations, so be on the lookout for updates for those watches and concerns for the streams and rivers. We will possibly see a little bit lighter rain conditions as this surface low begins to push a little bit further south, keeping the boundary along the Brooks Range. So most of the precipitation on Thursday will be across the Brooks Range, southern areas, and then foggy conditions will persist across much of the Bering into Thursday, with this low pressure system deepening a little bit further. Most of the rain is going to be across the central Aleutians and west with that strong southerly gusty flow. Now let's take a look at the temperatures as we head through the overnight hours into Wednesday morning. The coldest areas of the state are going to be to the north, lower 40s to mid 40s across the Brooks Range and north. And then the rest of the state is going to be primarily in the 50s to 60 degree range. The warmest areas from Susitna Valley and the western Kenai into the southwest. Across the Bering locations, expect temperatures in the lower 50s, and for the Gulf Coast locations ranging between 50 to 60 degrees. As we head into your Wednesday afternoon, temperatures will peak into the mid to upper 70s across parts of South Central, and the Southwest could see some warming trends as well. A few morning breaks will allow temperatures in the southeast to warm up to near 70 degrees or higher, and then across the interior near 60 degrees with cloud cover across the area and rain, and then temperatures to the north fairly uniform near 50 degrees. Now the Bering locations will see Alaska Peninsula near 60 degrees, and to the west in the mid 50s towards Shimia, where they're going to have a little bit more rain, and in the mid 50s also for the Pribilof Islands. Now, as we head into your Thursday morning, temperatures are going to be very similar to the previous day. Most notable change is going to be across the Brooks Range and north, where we're going to see temperatures dropping down to near 40 or just below, especially across the coastal locations. As the colder air mass begins to drop to the south, we'll see those temperatures starting to cool also for the Seward Peninsula, closer to the upper 40s to near 50 degrees during the overnight hours. For the southeast locations for Thursday morning, we're looking at temperatures to be fairly uniform into the mid-50s, so persistent forecasts for the Gulf locations with temperatures dropping into the lower to mid-50s. Quite a bit of rain across the area. Some cooling here across the interior. We'll possibly see a few temperatures dropping below the 50-degree mark, and then for the southwest also fairly uniform in the 50s. Now, as we head into Thursday afternoon, we're going to see the ridge rebounding. So the southwest, Alaska Peninsula, and south central locations will definitely climb to the upper 60s to mid 70-degree range, with the southeast still staying in the near 70-degree range. Northern tier of the state, a little bit cooler, near 45 to 50 degrees. And then the western areas of the state near 60 and a little bit cooler out towards the west. Now, in just a moment, we'll be back with your aviation forecast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Now on to the flying portion of the show. We're going to take a look across the state, and what you're going to see for Wednesday morning is a widespread MVFR to IFR ceilings, pretty much statewide. A little bit of clearing over there across the Anchorage Bowl and just south. As we look at the bearing, same conditions, however, more IFR conditions widespread. As we head into Wednesday afternoon, expect some improvement. However, most of the bearing will stay under those IFR conditions. Across the interior, some improvement from the Brooks Range and south there to IFR conditions. Across the eastern border, some clearing to VFR down through the middle of the Alaska Range there and the western areas of the Kenai, and Kodiak looks like it's going to break out into the VFR category during the afternoon. However, IFR is going to be widespread across the Gulf waters with MVFR and IFR conditions across much of the southeast. As we head into Thursday, don't look for much improvement, and a matter of fact, we will start the day once again pretty much in the MVFR to IFR categories statewide, with the same breaks a little bit better across the western Kenai there. For the bearing, looking at widespread IFR conditions with the Alaska Peninsula, mainly in the MVFR category to Kodiak Island. Looking at the afternoon hours, get that clearing or improvement across the eastern and southern areas of the state, with IFR conditions actually moving into the southwest and western coast. Now for your southeast, for the afternoon, expect IFR to MVFR conditions to continue across the area and widespread all across the Gulf coastal areas and Prince William Sound. Now let's take a look at those passes in better depth. We have Anaktuvuk Pass, which will be IFR all day, as well as Adigan starting off the day with IFR improving to MVFR conditions. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will be IFR to MVFR. And Rainy Pass will have those same trends, IFR to MVFR late day. And Windy will be IFR to VFR during the afternoon hours, and Isabel Pass will be IFR to VFR as well. Looking at Mentasta, looking at conditions starting off as IFR, improvement to MVFR in the afternoon. Tanita will go IFR to MVFR as well in the afternoon. Portage is expected to go from IFR to MVFR, and Chilkoot and White Pass, we're going to stay in the MVFR conditions all day. Now, your freezing levels to start the day tomorrow, well, the surface freezing level is still off the north coast here, with 6,000 feet across the northwest, climbing to 14,000 feet as you head towards the Gulf waters, and then a decrease back towards 12,000 towards the Dixon entrance. Across the Bering, warmer air mass out here, so we have 8,000 feet across the northern waters, climbing to 14,000 towards the eastern Aleutians there. Now, for icing concerns tomorrow, mainly across the northern and western areas of the state, and then we're going to see between 6,000 to 12,000 feet for those icing concerns, with the lower the lower elevations to the north seeing those 6,000 foot areas where you can see isolated to moderate conditions. Now, for your jet stream tomorrow, it's going to be an amplified pattern. The ridge that we've been talking about for days is holding in this pattern. A little bit of a northerly jet coming in, so interaction with the polar jet with low pressure just off the northeastern Beaufort Sea coast and out there to the west, with a low pressure just to the east and the west of this ridge, making it an effective blocking pattern. So here at 9,000 feet, we have the circulation around the ridge over the Alaska Peninsula with the higher speed maxes across the Bering between 45 to 50 knots, mainly out of the south. Onshore flow, we're going to bring a westerly component across the state, across the Brooks Range, more of a northerly component between 30 to 45 knots up north, and between 30 to 45 knots along the southern tier of the state. Now across the Gulf, looking at 25 to 35 knots in the southeast, a little bit lighter flow as you head towards the Dixon entrance, but primarily between 25 to 35 knots out of the north direction. Looking at your 3,000-foot winds, we're going to see the strongest winds across the northern tier of the state, mainly out of the south and west direction, and lighter speeds across the Gulf and out towards the Bering, stronger winds between 30 to 50 knots, strongest there to the west. To sum all this up, we're seeing the turbulence widespread across much of the state and across the Bering.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Dehne and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Dehne's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that they could that would be easier to travel with, you know, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy. And it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer. Computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned the it's like fly paper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now we're going to start your marine forecast out by looking at the sea ice edge, and you can see that's still way to the north of the north coast, and we are expecting conditions to continue melting as we head into the end of the week. Now let's take a look at the southeast for your Wednesday forecast. We are expecting some onshore flow to begin to develop, and with still a southerly push through the inner channels there. We're looking at a little bit more of a northerly flow, however, towards the Dixon entrance, all under 20 knots on this day. Seas will be between 2 to 3 feet across the inner channels, and then across the outer waters around 4 feet. And then as we head into your Thursday, expect winds to still be pushing onshore with a southerly flow across the northern channels and more of a northerly flow once again towards that Lynn entrance. And then, the Dixon entrance, the Lynn Canal's to the north. And now your seas on this day will be 2 feet across the inner channels and between 5 to 6 feet across those outer waters. Taking a look at the north and western Gulf locations, a little bit stronger wind speeds out there, small craft out of the west and southwest directions, a little bit lighter for the northern Gulf and the Prince William Sound and northern Cook Inlet. We'll see 10 to 15 knots, and seas to the north there will also be between 2 to 4 feet, with the seas across the areas to the south with small crafts will be ranging between 7 to 10 feet. Now looking at your Thursday forecast, winds are going to be tapering down some, but still persisting small craft at the southern tip of the Kenai to Kodiak Island there. Seas around these locations will be between 5 to 8 feet. And then the northern waters will be lighter wind speeds, more out of the south to west directions, and seas will be between 4 to 5 feet. Now let's take a look at the southwest. We'll see small crafts out there just north on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay will be at 15 knots, and primary flow is going to be out of the west to southwest directions. On the southern side of the Alaska Peninsula, seas will be between 5 to 6 feet across the bearing locations between 4 to 5 feet. For your Thursday forecast, looking at primarily a westerly flow pattern, all under small craft advisory criteria and 3 to 5 foot seas, even for the west side of Kodiak Island there in Shelikof Strait. Now looking at the Aleutian chain, we'll see the most action out there with the winds between 35 knots for tomorrow. And then let me step out of your direction here for the eastern Aleutians. We'll see 20 to 30 knots through there, so some small craft. However, the seas will be highest across the central Aleutians and much of the Bering between 11 to 16 feet, with the higher seas there to the south. For the western areas of the chain, expect seas between 11 to 14 feet with that northerly flow component. For your Thursday forecast, it'll become south to southeast direction across all the areas with gale criteria again for the central Aleutians. And on either side, we'll see small craft mainly, with seas ranging on this day between 10 to 17 feet, the highest seas across the central waters, the central Aleutian waters. And now for your west coast forecast, we're expecting southerly flow. Let me just step out of your way here so you can see the Pribilofs out there towards the west is going to be small craft advisory for Wednesday, seas between 4 to 9 feet, highest seas out towards the central Bering. And we'll see on Thursday, forecast will be primarily small craft across the area with southerly flow, and seas are going to be increasing between 5 to 9 feet across the area, also 10 feet towards the Pribilof Islands. For the west coast on Wednesday, looking at a little bit of a directional change here from east to more of a southwesterly direction towards the Kotzebue Sound. Small craft up towards Utqiagvik, and then across the areas of the Bering Strait will be a little bit lighter flow. Seas on this day will be ranging between 4 to 8 feet with the higher seas, with the higher winds there to the north. And on your Thursday, a little bit lighter wind speeds, more of a northerly flow component. And across the Seward Peninsula here, a little bit directional wind change shifting to the southwest as you head south of Port Clarence. Now let's take a look and recap your forecast. The main area concern is going to be rainfall across the interior. Low pressure across the northern interior of the state is going to be dropping to the south, with a ridge holding onto the southern areas of the Gulf, spreading marine layers back into the southeast and across much of the Bering. Low pressure across the Bering will lift north, bring rain across through the interior as we head into the end of the week.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.